Good morning. Good morning. Would you please take your seats? Your Excellency, Mr. Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Your Excellency, Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, President of the General Assembly. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my honor to welcome you to the commemoration ceremony marking the 25th anniversary of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. I would ask everyone practically to please use your earpieces for better sound and to assist with English-French interpretation. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations observes this commemoration every year so that the world does not forget one of the darkest chapters in human history. On this day, we also renew our commitment to prevent such atrocities in the future. It is our moral responsibility. I would like to offer a special welcome to the Rwandan survivors who have joined us here today. We are particularly humbled by your presence. Our thoughts go to the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi, during which Hutu, Twa, and others who opposed the genocide were also killed. Our thoughts also go out to the thousands of people who survived, but still suffer from the consequences of this tragedy. We pay our deepest respects to them all. In addition to this event here at UN headquarters, UN offices are organizing commemorative activities in numerous other locations around the world this week, from Ankara and Antananarivo to Nairobi and New Delhi, to name just a few. Before giving the floor to our distinguished speakers, I would like to invite you to watch a short video produced by the government of Rwanda, which was also shown in Kigali on the 7th of April, the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda.
Nari mfite umugabo n'abana batatu ariko bose baragiye sigara ndi jyenyine.
After 1994, our people were completely broken. But we made three fundamental choices that guide us to this day. We chose to stay together.
Kubabarira ni ikintu umuntu yikorera ku giti cye. Ntabwo ubabarira umuntu kubera ko agomba imbabazi zawe. Nta nubwo umubabarira kubera ko izo mbabazi azigomba. Umubabarira kugira ngo wowe ubwawe ugire amahoro muri wowe.
Turi bamwe, nta vangura ntaki rwose. Ibyo bituma rero numva nta rubanza nta na rutoya ngiye mfite kuri bariya bantu.
We chose to be accountable to ourselves.
Nyuma gacaca zibaye narabyireze kandi zabaye n'ubundi ndahonga iwacu.
We chose to think big.
Tubifatanyije ari urubyiruko tukigira ku bakuru ibyo batugejejeho tukagera ikirenge mu cyabo aho bagejeje bakora natwe tukahafatiraho kugira ngo no kuba nta bumwe mu bakontribute kugira ngo tugire aho tuva tugire n'aho tugana.
I look at the bigger picture and I make sure in my daily work I'm doing my part in helping Rwanda to achieve that big picture.
We are truly the first generation of Rwandans who have a place we call home for all of us.
There is more hard work ahead of us. But Rwandans, we are ready.
I would like now to invite our speakers, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Mr. Paul Kagame, the Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garcés, Mrs. Esther Mujoao Kaina, genocide survivor, co-founder of the Association of Widows of April's Genocide, and our keynote speaker today, and the Reverend Marcel Wineza, Jesuit priest and survivor of the genocide, to each light a candle in honor of the victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I would like to ask those of you in possession of the LED candles to switch them on concurrently with the candle lighting in front of you. Thank you. We will now observe a minute of silence in honor of the victims of the genocide. May I request you all to please rise. Thank you. Please take your seats. May I ask you to leave your lights illuminated and place them on the ledge of your desk. And I am now honored to invite our first speaker, His Excellency United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, to make a statement.
Your Excellency Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda, Your Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, President of the General Assembly, distinguished survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be with you on this solemn and moving occasion. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. In one of the darkest chapters in recent human history, more than 1 million people, overwhelmingly Tutsi, but also moderate Hutu and others who oppose the genocide, were systematically killed in less than 3 months. On this day, we honor those who were murdered and reflect on the sufferance and resilience of those who survived. I would particularly like to acknowledge the presence of our dear guests from Rwanda, Mrs. Esther Mujoao and Father Marcel Wineza, who survived the genocide and will be sharing their stories with us. Today, we stand in solidarity with the people of Rwanda. But our reflection on the Rwandan genocide must also go beyond one country and one moment in history. We must take a hard look at the present. As we renew our resolve to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again, we are seeing dangerous trends of rising xenophobia, racism, and intolerance in many parts of the world. Particularly troubling is the current widespread proliferation of hate speech and incitement to violence. things that were very clearly present in Rwanda immediately before the genocide. They are an affront to our values and threaten human rights, social stability, and peace. The massacre at 2 mosques in New Zealand a few weeks ago, is just the latest tragedy rooted in such poison. Today's commemoration gives us an opportunity to once again raise our voices against racism, xenophobia, and related intolerance, including social and ethnic discrimination, anti-Muslim hatred, and anti-Semitism. Wherever they occur, these evils should be identified, confronted, and stopped to prevent them leading, as they have in the past, to hate crimes and genocide. I call on all political, religious, and civil society leaders to reject hate speech and discrimination and to work vigorously to address and mitigate the root causes that undermine social cohesion and create conditions for hatred and intolerance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the capacity for evil resides in all societies, but so too do the qualities of understanding, kindness, justice, and reconciliation. That is one of the profound lessons of the Rwandan experience. The country's recovery is a rightful source of pride and comfort for the people and government of Rwanda. And I would like to commend Rwanda for its exemplary role in the international community. Rwanda is today the 4th largest contributor to UN peacekeeping operations. And it is notable that a nation that has endured the worst atrocities should risk its soldiers to ensure those atrocities cannot happen elsewhere. After having suffered unspeakable gender-based violence, women now hold 60% of parliamentary seats, another example that Rwanda can share with the world. And Rwanda has also embraced environmental sustainability. As a pioneer in banning single-use plastic bags, it's now one of the cleanest nations on earth. In all, Rwanda's experience holds so many lessons for humanity. From the darkest depths, the country has risen in a quarter century as a pioneer for the sustainable future we all strive for. On this day of commemoration, let us all pledge to work together to build an harmonious future for all people everywhere. This is the best way to honor those who lost their lives so tragically in Rwanda 25 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It is now my honor to invite the President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garcés, to deliver her remarks. Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency Ms. Valentine Rugabisa, Permanent Representative of Rwanda to the United Nations, Mr. Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Ms. Alison Smale, Undersecretary General for Global Communications, Ms. Esther Mahawayo-Kainer, co-founder of the Association of Widows of April's Genocide, Reverend Marcel Uwinesa, Jesuit priest and doctoral candidate at Boston College, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I thank the Permanent Mission of Rwanda and the UN Department of Global Communications for organizing this ceremony to mark the 25th anniversary of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Thank you, President Kagame, for being here at this time of solemn reflection for your country and for the world. I speak on behalf of all member states in expressing solidarity with the people of Rwanda. And thank you, Ms. Mahawayo-Kainer and Reverend Uwinesa, for coming here to share your own stories. Excellencies, in just 100 days, starting on 7 April 1994, more than 800,000 Rwandans were killed, an average of over 8,000 people a day, more than 30 in the time allocated to this very ceremony. The Tutsis were decimated. Those who opposed the genocide, including Hutus, were also targeted and killed. Hundreds and thousands of people were orphaned, widowed, raped, injured, and forcibly displaced. The international community watched in horror, but we did not prevent the atrocities. The years that followed saw local, national, and international efforts to address the legacy of this tragedy, from peace education initiatives to trials in national courts at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and through the Gacaca community justice system. But these years also saw heated discussion about what the international community should have done to prevent the genocide, what it should do in the future as well. Dear friends, I wish we could honor all those who died 25 years ago by claiming victory today over hatred, intolerance, terrorism, and murderous violence. But the stain on our conscience remains. There have been many tragedies since. So as we light candles this morning, let us also rekindle our efforts to realize our promise of never again. Let us condemn all forms and manifestations of the denial of genocide. Let us invest in education to enshrine the lessons of our past in future generations. Let us redouble our efforts to fight hate speech and call out those who dehumanize others. And let us work to put in action our responsibility to prevent by addressing the root causes of conflict, by acting on early warning signs such as human rights violations, by supporting the Special Advisor on the prevention of genocide, and by increasing our efforts to build and sustain peace. Excellencies and friends, we are here today to mourn and to remember, but also to reflect and learn. And there cannot be a greater lesson and inspiration than the resilience, the strength, and creativity of Rwandans, who are an example to us all. Murakotsi, thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to invite our keynote speaker, His Excellency Mr. Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, President of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, permanent representatives, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the organizers of this event, and we are happy to be with you today. And also thanking you for attending this 15th annual day of reflection. Most especially, I wish to thank the Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly for co-organizing this event with Rwandans and for the important statements we have just heard. Remembrance is an act of honor. More than 1 million lives were lost. We honor the victims. We honor the courage of the survivors. And we honor the manner in which Rwandans have come together to rebuild our nation. We honor and thank you all those who have been with Rwanda through these hard times. Remembrance is also an act of prevention. When genocide is dormant, it takes the form of denial and trivialization. Denial is an ideological foundation of genocide. Countering denial is essential for breaking the cycle and preventing any recurrence. In that spirit, the General Assembly voted overwhelmingly last year to adopt the proper terminology, genocide against the Tutsi. I thank member states most sincerely for this measure. Such a clarification should not have been necessary, given the irrefutable proof and historical facts of what happened in Rwanda. But the efforts to rewrite history are relentless and increasingly mainstream. The victims of genocide are targeted because of who they are, a distinction fundamental to the definition of genocide itself, both morally and legally. This does not in any way diminish the memory of others who died. Remembrance also serves to help spur the change for the better. There are encouraging signs that lessons are slowly being learned and institutionalized. It helps that we have something to build on. In 1994, 3 representatives on the United Nations Security Council consistently called for action despite the resistance of more powerful states. They were Ibrahim Gambari of Nigeria, Colin Keating of New Zealand, and Karol Kovanda of the Czech Republic. The Genocide Convention is now 70 years old. Of the 149 states party, nearly 1/4 accessed after April 1994. France, Italy, Luxembourg, Poland, and Switzerland have criminalized denial of the genocide against the Tutsi, and Belgium has announced its intention to do so. Canada and France have designated April 7th as a day of commemoration. We applaud these steps and encourage others to follow suit. Perhaps the most significant advances relate to peacekeeping. With the strong support of the Secretary General and member states, civilian protection has moved to the heart of peacekeeping doctrines. I commend the member states that have already adopted the Kigali principles on the protection of civilians. Of course, what really counts is living by these guidelines in the field. In 1994, the warnings of the United Nations Force Commander, General Dallaire of Canada, fell on deaf ears. In the absence of a protection of civilians' mandate, there are limits to what good commanders can achieve. Nevertheless, he stayed and his forces did what they could. Captain Mbaye Diagne of Senegal helped save countless lives before giving his own. For several years, Rwanda has been among the top 5 troop contributors to United Nations peacekeeping operations. We intend to maintain this commitment. But Rwanda does not only contribute soldiers and police. We come to the task with the values instilled by our tragic history. As a nation once betrayed by the international community, we are determined to do our part, working with others to make things better going forward. To close, I come back again to your presence here with us today. It is a gesture of solidarity that we do not take lightly. Once again, thanks to the Secretary General, Madam President of the General Assembly, and all of you here today.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for those powerful words. Before we hear from our next speaker, I have the pleasure of introducing a musical interlude by a quintet of musicians from the UN Staff Recreation Council Symphony Orchestra. Thank you for this beautiful and solemn note. I now have the honor to invite Mrs. Esther Mujuaya-Kaina to share her story with us. Mrs. Mujuaya-Kaina is a sociologist, psychotherapist, and a survivor of the genocide. While she survived, she lost most of her immediate family, including her parents, many of her siblings, and her husband. Mrs. Mujuaya-Kaina is the author of several books and co-founder of the Association of Widows of April's Genocide that was created in 1994 to help reintegrate genocide widows back into society. Please, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République du Rwanda, Excellence, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Excellence, Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée générale, Excellence, Mesdames et Messieurs ambassadeurs de vos pays respectifs, chers amis, chers frères et sœurs rwandais, je vous remercie beaucoup pour avoir été si nombreux avec nous aujourd'hui dans un cadre aussi solennel pour commémorer les nôtres. Cependant, je dois vous dire que je suis là avec deux sentiments ambigus. D'abord, c'est très dur pour moi, en tant que rescapée du génocide perpétré contre les Tutsis il y a 25 ans, de me tenir dans ces lieux où on aurait pu décider autrement. Si on avait pris les Tutsis du Rwanda comme des êtres humains qui avaient une valeur, si on avait pris au sérieux la Convention de Genève auparavant, lorsqu'on avait exterminé les Tutsis, les miens seraient là et je ne serais pas ici. Mais de l'autre côté, je suis heureuse d'être ici parce que je suis en vie. On le prend pour acquis, mais quand on a traversé ce que nous avons traversé, être en vie, ce n'est pas aussi évident. Et pour cela, je voudrais remercier quelqu'un. Je voudrais vous remercier, Monsieur le Président. Vous nous avez sauvé la vie. Vous m'avez sauvé la vie avec mes filles. Vous avez sauvé la vie de plusieurs veuves et plusieurs orphelins. Les rescapés qui sont là pour le moment au Rwanda, qui commémorent les leurs, nous vous remercions, ainsi que l'armée que vous aviez à ce moment. Beaucoup sont morts pour que nous soyons vivants. Et cela, nous ne l'oublions pas. Je reviens un peu à la photo juillet 1994, lorsque nous nous sommes retrouvés vivantes, là, je ne suis pas morte, je suis là. Mais qui suis-je quand tous les miens sont tués? Qui suis-je quand mon mari est tué? Qui suis-je quand mon papa et ma maman sont tués? Qui suis-je quand ma sœur, ses enfants, son mari, mes oncles, mes neveux, ils sont tous tués? Et je suis une parmi des milliers. Et je suis encore heureuse que je suis survivante. Par miracle, je n'ai pas un seul coup de machette. La plupart des rescapés que nous avons aujourd'hui, ils ont été brisés dans leur corps et dans leur âme. Lorsque nous nous sommes retrouvés en tant que veuves, d'abord on ne croyait pas, on croyait toujours être le dernier, on croyait qu'on est le seul ou la seule qui a survécu, parce que c'était quasi impossible de survivre. Et après, tu as trouvé une autre amie qui a aussi survécu, une autre qui a survécu, et les histoires qu'on se racontait, c'était vraiment des horreurs. Et là, nous avons, Dieu merci, sans le savoir, commencé une association qui nous a sauvé la vie, parce que du coup, de nous retrouver dans cette association des veuves du génocide d'Avril à Vega, du coup, nous avons de nouveau une famille. Du coup, nous pouvions de nouveau dire d'où nous venons, où nous appartenons. J'allais dire de quel clan nous sommes, des clans des Rwandais. Donc là, ce clan des veuves, ça nous a aidé énormément à être de nouveau vivantes, et pas seulement vivantes, mais mortes dedans. Mais nous avons réalisé très très vite que nous avions d'énormes défis à relever. Nous devions faire dans tout. Nous avions la santé, que ce soit la santé physique ou la santé mentale. Nous devions reconstruire les maisons parce que tout avait été détruit. Nous devions reconstruire une société parce que nous avions une société complètement cassée. On ne pouvait plus faire confiance. En qui peux-tu faire confiance quand le tueur, ça a été un voisin, quand le tueur, ça a été une femme ou un enfant, quand le tueur, ça a été un médecin ou un pasteur, quand le tueur, ça a été un professeur? Comment veux-tu faire encore confiance? Mais en plus, nous nous retrouvions vraiment dans une... Je ne peux plus faire confiance en l'humanité. Comme je vous ai dit, c'est un de mes malaises de me retrouver dans l'enceinte des Nations Unies. J'ai perdu à ce moment confiance dans l'humanité. Ce génocide contre les Tutsis en 1994, il y avait moyen de le prévenir, on le savait. Il y avait moyen de l'arrêter pendant qu'il se passait. Le général Dallaire était là-bas. Il a demandé qu'on change les articles, qu'on lui ajoute des membres. Ça n'a pas été écouté. Donc vous comprenez qu'à ce moment-là, sincèrement, que je puisse encore faire confiance dans l'humanité, c'était très, très difficile. En plus, pour la plupart des personnes qui ont survécu, on a survécu avec un tel traumatisme. On a encore les odeurs, on a encore les bruits, on a encore les images, et il faut faire avec, et il faut vivre avec. Mais comme je vous dis, et c'est pour cela que je vous disais mon merci, on ne peut pas reconstruire s'il n'y a pas déjà une base de stabilité et de sécurité. Nous avons eu cette base de stabilité et de sécurité, et à partir de là, nous avons commencé à nous reconstruire. Nous avons fait dans toutes les directions dont je viens de vous parler. Et je me souviens une fois d'une visite que vous avez effectuée, Monsieur le Président, à l'association, et vous avez dit, mais ici, il y a tous les ministères, parce que nous devions toucher à tout. Nous ne pouvions pas être spécialisés dans un domaine, nous devions faire tout. Je ne dis pas que le chantier est fini, il y a encore beaucoup de chantiers au Rwanda, il y a encore beaucoup à faire. Je parle maintenant comme psychothérapeute, c'est ce que je suis devenue après. J'ai refait mes études et je travaille comme psychothérapeute avec des personnes traumatisées après les guerres ou après un génocide. Et je peux vous dire que oui, c'est possible. On peut se reconstruire malgré tout, malgré l'horreur complète. On peut de nouveau être vivante. Mais pour cela, il faut vraiment qu'on y mette tous nos efforts. Et je pense à l'individu, comme on a dit dans le film, il y a l'individuel, il y a le collectif, il y a les grands, les politiciens. Et c'est pour ça que je dis maintenant, je suis quand même heureuse d'être là, parce que je peux vous faire cette demande, je peux vous faire ce défi, s'il vous plaît. Nous avons été une leçon. Le Rwanda, nous avons été une leçon, malheureusement, mais au moins que le sang des nôtres serve à quelque chose. En 1959, quand les premiers pogroms contre les Tutsis ont commencé, j'étais sur le dos de ma mère. En 1994, quand le génocide des Tutsis s'est passé à Kigali, j'avais mon bébé de 6 mois sur le dos. Je souhaiterais que mon bébé, non, elle n'est plus bébé, elle a maintenant 25 ans, je souhaiterais qu'elle ne doive jamais s'enfuir avec un bébé sur le dos. Et ça, c'est votre mission, les Nations Unies, toutes les nations ensemble, faites en sorte que cela ne se reproduise plus. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mrs. Mujawayo-Kaina, for sharing that moving testimony with us, and we should surely respond to your challenge. It is my honor now to invite Reverend Marcel Wineza to share his story with us. He is a Jesuit priest and a survivor of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. He is currently a doctoral candidate in systematic theology at Boston College. Reverend, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda, my home, thank you for saving our lives. Your Presidency, Your Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, Her Excellency, Espinosa, President of the United Nations Assembly, Your Excellency, Ambassador Rugwabiza Valentin, friends and family, standing on this August hall on October 4th, 1965, Pope Paul VI insisted, never again one against the other, never more. Was it not principally for this purpose that the United Nations was set up? The search for justice and peace remained the guide for the future of humankind. Never again, he ended. Tragically, nearly 30 years later, in 1994, never again became another again. During the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, we kept asking, where has humanity gone? Exactly on this date, April 12, 1994, Western countries pulled out their citizens out of Rwanda. On April 12, everything my family owned was demolished. I was asked to provide a photo for my family. I actually don't have any. On April 21st, the United Nations Security Council pulled out some of the soldiers from 2,500 to 270. The Tutsis were left to face a planned genocide. You left us, and even when the genocide was ending, the genocidaire who had perpetrated it got into Congo with arms. They were left to go. Having organized this, and being a priest, and after many years of struggle, Secretary General and President, thank you very much for organizing this. In my own name, and hopefully speaking for the name of so many survivors, for this gesture, I forgive you. The genocide architects represent a concerted effort to tear apart the Rwandan social fabric. They wanted to make any normal relationship between a Rwandan Hutu and a Tutsi definitely impossible. Uncles turned against their nephews and nieces. Mothers witnessed relatives murdering their children. Even, especially, some of the mentally sick Tutsi, those we call Abasazi back home, at the Ndera Psychiatric Hospital, were not spared. In fact, when the expatriates came to take their own, they came to that hospital and only took one Italian lady who was mentally sick there, but not haunted, and the Tutsis were left and were all killed. Countless brave rescuers of Tutsi understood what it means to be Rwandan. For them, whenever we speak of Rwanda, I think of them. And they understood what it means to have common and shared humanity ahead of any ethnic labels. Many accepted to die. Our president mentioned them. We honor them. We honor Prime Minister Agathe Uwiringiyimana, Sister Félicité Niyitegeka, and already mentioned Senegalese Captain Mbaye Diagne, among many others. The catastrophe of 1994 was born of a racist policy rather than war, as many want to put it across. We have to challenge many deniers who use war as a means to minimize the gravity of the genocide, knowing that all lives matter, but a genocide is no crime like any other. To fight against deniers, hard work and commitment is needed, and we know that puts us out for criticisms, and the United Nations should not fear this. Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize Peace laureate Elie Wiesel said, genocide denier represents a double killing. The initial murder of the victim is the first death, and then after the physical killing comes a murder of memory. In these past years, the corpus of denial about the killing of Tutsi has grown, multiplying the second death over and over again. Like so many others, I lost my father, I lost 2 brothers, I lost a sister, I lost my grandmother, aunties, uncles, and cousins. Some were thrown in pit latrines. Some in America will not know what a pit latrine is. My grandmother and many others were thrown in the river Nyabarongo to take them back to Ethiopia. Others were raped and are now living with HIV. At the height of the genocide, we left the compound of Kabwai where we were with my cousin Mary, and we wanted to drink some water at a well. There we met some youth militia trained to kill, and they beat us seriously. I survived partly thanks to a wonderful Hutu man, Mr. Joseph Kabera, who hid me in a beehive compound when the church itself that was supposed to help us had thrown us away. The beehive compounds and the bees became friendly. Thanks goes so much to the current government that stopped the genocide. I share this story with many. It has left fragmented memories and identities, but the road must continue. A priest threw me out of Bimana Church, and for many years, I hated Catholic priests. Yet later, I became a Jesuit priest because I felt when a house is burning, despite the risks, firefighters still get into the house to put off fire. This has led me through a school of forgiveness. Later, I met the killer of my 2 brothers and my sister, and when I saw him, I thought he was coming to kill me. As if in a movie, he knelt before me and asked to forgive him. After a period of confusion, asking myself what was happening or whether I even have the right to forgive on behalf of the dead, by a higher power which I cannot still measure in a laboratory, I took him, embraced him, and when finally I said, "I forgive you," I felt free. Survivors certainly have choices to make. So has Rwanda done. But it was so well said recently, on April 7th, by our president, survivors are the only ones with something left to give, the power of forgiveness. Now I call that power God, the same who lived through our rescuers, the same who worked through the soldiers. Ever since, I felt free to remember differently. When I came to New York, this city, I saw the long bridges, and I said to my aunt, I would like to be a living bridge. And now standing here, in this place where we are all abandoned, I invite the United Nations to continue being bridge builders and messengers of restorative justice. And having forgiven the leaders here, I hope the forgiveness also goes with the reparation for survivors. The Rwandan Catholic Church, with all its historical limitations, keeps undergoing an ecclesial examination of conscience. We must not be servants of any ideology, but that of Jesus Christ. There are many examples. Both the bishops of Rwanda and Pope Francis, in the presence of our president here, did apologize for the sins of the church in Rwanda. However, and this is a challenge, Rwandans are very religious, but many of us are hypocrites. We must change our hearts and minds as men and women who fear God, respect the sacredness of life, as we have seen in those who fought and rescued us. Rwandan leaders have instilled the spirit that we are destined for better, despite poverty, war, and genocide. If you visit Rwanda, as many of you have done today, listening to the Secretary General saying it shortly, you will see that those were not the end of the story. Although there is room for much improvement as we are a poor country, Rwanda is ranked as the second easiest place to do business. It has contributed to peacekeepers. All Rwandans, without exception, have access to health and have access to education, and no longer are they asked what ethnic affiliation they have in a class when they are studying. Young people remain Rwanda's greatest hope, and the leadership of women is the highest in the world. My dear friends, all people matter, but genocide is no crime like any other. Save people and their environment. Build a planet where no life is disposable, but a sacred gift of God. And to conclude, a story from the America South illustrates the need and the joy of reconciliation. In the intense days of segregation, and more still needs to be done, there was a wooden barrier placed about halfway down the center aisle of St. Francis de Sales Church in New Orleans, Louisiana. White parishioners sat in front of the barricade. Black parishioners sat behind it. When the archdiocese desegregated its churches in the 1960s, that barrier was placed in a storage. When it was time to choose a new altar, a place where we pray, some black parishioners refashioned the discarded barricade into a new altar. On the day it was dedicated, the words of the pastor as he blessed it are still engraved in my heart. The wood, he said, the wood which once divided us along racial lines is now the wood that calls us to be brothers and sisters in the Lord. In Rwanda, that wood calls us to be Rwandans. To all of you, be that wood. And I pray, as we have seen, I pray in the end you will say, we have made a difference like those who saved us. We protected the human life. We keep saving the world. Thank you for your attention, and God's blessings upon you and your good work.
Thank you, Reverend Wineza, for those powerful and touching words. It is now my honor to invite Her Excellency Mrs. Valentine Rugwabiza, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Rwanda to the United Nations, to deliver final words of thanks. Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Republic of Rwanda, my President, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear survivors, dear friends. Mr. President, thank you very much for honoring us with your presence here today for this 25th commemoration for Kwibuka 25th here at the United Nations. 25 years ago, this very same month, when the world and the United Nations abandoned Rwanda, it is you, Mr. President, who led the Rwanda Patriotic Army and led the campaign to stop the genocide against the Tutsi. We all heard the testimonies of Esther and Father Wineza. And the terrible inheritance of Rwanda was that trust was lost. There was no trust remaining. There was no trust possible when indeed neighbors, friends, even family members had turned into killers. The survivors decided to hear the call of the president to give a chance to a common future, to a brighter future. And that is how the rebuilding of Rwanda was made possible. So it is of high historical importance for us to have you here in this very house that let Rwanda down, in this very house where Rwanda is alive, bright, is an active participant, active player in the international community. It is truly historical to have you who had launched the campaign to stop the genocide here with us today. The security, safety of all Rwandans is a given today. And the majority of our population is really made of young people who are less than 25 years old. They are the first generation to have experienced uninterrupted peace and security since Rwanda has been independent. So this is just to give a sense of the fact that it is not so long ago that we have experienced peace and security uninterrupted, and that is based on such a solid foundation. And that solid foundation is the social cohesion of Rwanda brought together. Mr. Secretary General, we thank you for your comforting words. We thank you for your tireless efforts to reform this organization, to reform the United Nations, so that it will be an organization that can be present for the peoples who have only the United Nations to look up to. Thank you, Madam President of the General Assembly, for standing with us and representing all members of this organization, and for sharing your encouraging words. I would also like to thank very much my colleagues, the permanent representatives here present, all the diplomats present with us today. as we remember our loved ones, and we recommit our resolve that never again is not only today's reality in Rwanda, but that never again will be a reality everywhere else in the world. In closing, I would like to thank very much the survivors. The Rwanda we know today could not have been realized without the many survivors who individually and through personal fortitude choose to forgive the perpetrators of the genocide and choose to give a chance to our common future, a brighter future. A future where all Rwandans today have equal rights and dignity. Special thanks again to Esther and to Father Wineza for sharing their own stories with us. So let me end here by thanking you once again, joining the President of the Republic of Rwanda in thanking you once again for being with us today, for your friendship and for your solidarity in the journey that we took 25 years ago in rebuilding Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, for these remarks. I would like to thank all our speakers, musicians, and all of you for joining us today to mark the 25th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Thank you for your presence and for your contribution.